What's beyond dispute is this: drone attacks have become a huge weapon for this country, and this president has made unprecedented use of them. NBC News has obtained a government document that lays out the legal argument to justify the president's use of drones to kill al-Qaeda suspects, including, in some cases, U.S. citizens.
Nightly News on Tuesday. We're back with our roundtable, and that document was obtained by our own investigative correspondent, Michael Isikoff, which spelled out the legal basis for even targeting Americans who join al-Qaeda. That's where the debate has been. But after all that's happened this week, Mike, as you look forward, where is this debate actually going? What is the debate that we are actually having?
Well, it's a very difficult one legally and morally and strategically. First of all, what was significant about the document that we reported on is it really did go beyond, in certain respects, what had been said publicly about what the legal foundations were for targeting Americans who are suspected of being operational leaders of al-Qaeda. Attorney General Holder had given a speech last year in which he set out a three-point test for this. Number one, that the target is believed to be is going to pose an imminent threat of a violent attack. You read the memo and you see there's a great elasticity to how that's defined. Imminent attack does not mean they have specific intelligence about an ongoing plot. It may only talk about recent activities, and if that target hasn't renounced those activities, then it can be assumed. It's a broader definition of imminence than I think most people had realized. The second part of the test is if capture is unfeasible. Well, what defines unfeasible? And the memo talks about, well, if capture would pose an undue risk for U.S. personnel, we can that would be a factor in determining that it was unfeasible. These were issues that were not clearly spelled out by the administration beforehand. They use language that's very ill-defined and open to broad interpretations, and I think that's why you're seeing so much attention to this issue.
But it's still a question, Caddy, as to whether lawmakers want to change the policy. Because the debate we're hearing with John Brennan and everybody else is, are you getting access to the documents? How much oversight is there? And before you respond, let me play John Brennan, who tried to clear some of the air about how difficult the process is that they go through.
I think there's a misimpression on the part of some American people who believe that we take strikes to punish terrorists for past transgressions. Nothing could be further from the truth. We only take such actions as a last resort to save lives when there's no other alternative to taking an action that's going to mitigate that threat.
Well, members of Congress hate not being informed, but the downside of being informed is that you then have some responsibility for the policy that's happening. We are now starting to have a discussion about the drone strikes and the benefits and otherwise of them to America's national security. I mean, what struck me about those hearings most of all is we heard a lot about the legality or otherwise of striking American citizens, about how much information Congress was having or not having, but we didn't hear what I'm hearing from national security people is that there is a concern about the benefit that these drone strikes are not actually in America's long-term political interests in areas of the world like Pakistan and the Yemen. We are turning large numbers of moderate Pakistanis, journalists, politicians, lawyers, doctors, the kind of people that shape policy in those countries, against us. Admiral Mullen, General McChrystal have all expressed concerns that every time we have a drone that mishits somebody, kills civilians, we set back our strategy in those countries by months, if not years.
That's the national security overseas. I guess, you know, Mayor Reed, there's also a question about where this goes. I mean, I think that ultimately a lot of liberal critics are saying if this becomes more elastic, if this is unchecked, what are the limits to it? I mean, look what's going on in Los Angeles. This pursuit of Chris Dormer, who is the officer there and the subject of this manhunt. You know, could we ultimately use drone technology to both, you know, track him and ultimately kill him if he's an imminent threat? Is that where it goes, and is that an appropriate use of it?
I don't think it goes there if we prevent it from going there. The president's been very clear that he wants to create a structure that informs Congress appropriately. But we've got to remember, both President Bush and President Obama have kept this country safe. And you know, when you communicate with him personally, he takes nothing more seriously than being commander-in-chief. And he is not going to take a tool that saves American lives off the table, but he is open to having this conversation. He said it immediately and responded to Michael pretty
But how open? I mean, here's the bottom line. Heads, executives, a Republican and a Democrat believe the same thing, which is when you're fighting terror, the executive should have all the power. Because you know what? If something goes bad on your watch, it's really bad.
Exactly. But the Obama people do have an incentive for trying to do something about this, to put some limits on. And let me give you a statistic that will illustrate that. We heard John Brennan's comments about it's only a last resort. It's very rarely that we do this. The total number of Americans who've been killed by drone strikes under President Obama is 3. That happens to be exactly the same number of high-value detainees who were waterboarded under President Bush. And as we all know, the waterboarding is, and Michael will know this as well as anybody, is going to be part of the legacy of the Bush years. I don't think the Obama people want targeted killing of Americans to be very high up on the list of their legacy in national security policy, which is why they have an incentive to try to figure out a way to do something about this.
There is an additional incentive here as well, though, because drones are central to the Obama approach on national security, precisely because they want to disengage from what they regard as messy counterinsurgency operations, like in Afghanistan. So what do you do when you disengage from counterinsurgency operations? You have to step up counter-terrorism operations, which is what drones do and what they've done, in order just not to surrender this ground. So I think that the use of drones, expanded use of drones, is actually related to their broader strategy.